really happy to welcome you here. We had a very successful 18th BASIC Ministerial Meeting which was held here in New Delhi for 2 days. Yesterday, negotiators and experts sat together throughout the day, discussed in details, and now we have come out with a joint statement also. Today in the morning, we had the ministerial meeting, very interactive, and even after the meeting, we were on the coffee table, we were discussing a whole lot of issues. I think that interaction, informal interaction, was more interesting and more productive. So, that being the case, we regard BASIC countries as family of ideas, family of ideology, and family of having one concept, one position on issues relating to environment and our commitment to our own actions. And the joint statement which has been, I hope this is distributed. No, nothing is distributed. That also will be distributed. But I can tell you one thing, informally I can share with you, as I am a spokesman here, earlier I was party spokesman, now I am government spokesman, but even BASIC also I can do that job. So everybody agrees to that. See, first let's see. Let the distribution be over. One minute. He'll give now. Be please. Okay? So everybody got it? Speech will be given. Speech will be given. I am giving the speech. Okay. Chinese Senior Minister Xia, South Africa's Minister Molewa, and Brazil's Deputy Minister for this, Mr. Francisco Gaetani. So we had a very fruitful meeting. And the joint statement is not too lengthy. It gives our basic position. What we have said is finalization of elements for a draft negotiating text for 2015 Paris COP, which will come with outcome. That should be ready by 2014 at Lima. Because before the COP next year in Paris, where a major deal will be done for climate change post-2020 regime. So we want and we expect that the finalization of elements of draft negotiating text, that text must be ready 1 year before so that we can go ahead and discuss with many other countries and finalize it. It should not be a last-minute affair. That's what we expect. Second is, outcome of Durban platform for enhanced action must be in accordance with all principles, including equity and CBDR, common but differentiated. So this position, which is always there of the BASIC countries, is reiterated here. The third point, which is very important, which I must bring to your notice, is developed world should take lead in addressing climate change in accordance to their historical responsibilities. That's very important. And we expect that implementation of commitment of finance, technology, capacity building also must be fulfilled. In short, we expect that developed world should walk the talk. And we have highlighted, the statement highlights the importance and relevance of Article 4.7. The fourth issue, which is important, is As Kyoto remains essential and legally binding basis for pre-2020 mitigation ambitions, we want expeditious ratification of second commitment period of Kyoto Protocol. Because to keep that commitment and action, binding actions on developed world part will create a vacuum of action and will increase the emissions. The fifth important issue is concern for pre-2020 ambition gaps exists not only in mitigation but also in adaptation, finance, technology and capacity building, because these are all elements are important. Last point which I must notice is full operationalization of Institute of Bali and capitalization of Green Climate Fund, which was promised $100 billion per year. But even Oslo meeting has not produced, and we want that capitalization to happen soon. People must contribute. With that, the statement is in your hand. Our ministers will also take questions if you have any. Next meeting of BASIC, the South Africa has invited all of us in October, so the dates will be fixed in due time. There is like-minded countries meeting which China will host. Then the Major Economies Forum will meet in New York in September. And so before the Lima Conference of Parties in December, we have planned these three meetings: BASIC meeting in October, MEF meeting in September in New York, and like-minded countries meeting in China. So we'll continue to be in dialogue with each other, formally, informally, and arrive at a common position. That's the message this 18th BASIC Ministerial Meeting brings out. I think this is clear, and we are really happy to announce this. Now we'll take few questions on this issue. You will not ask about our internal issues now, because otherwise you will start with GM crop. That I'll address sometime else.
Mr. Javadekar,
Yes.
thank you. I wanted to ask you how much pressure you think the BASIC countries will be able to put on the developed world, because these points have been made earlier also, but countries like the USA aren't even part of Kyoto Protocol. So how do you see this in the light of this effort to have a common platform and to reiterate the historical responsibilities of the developed countries? How much pressure will you be able to put?
I think this needs to be answered by my colleagues, because they are more into it. But let me tell you that our homework, our continuous meetings and efforts will bring us and build up that pressure, because in South Africa, BASIC meeting, we also intend to invite G77 and other representatives, some representatives of other blocs also. So everybody is on. So if you have anything to say about this, because this is important.
在这个应对气候变化的多边进程当中啊，
Yeah, but here she will have translate on mic. She will speak. Please.
多边的进程啊，它有多边的机制安排，它是这个公开、透明、广泛参与、协商一致的原则。所以在这多边的进程当中呢，应该按照这个多边的机制来这个进行谈判，完成整个谈判的进程。
So multilateral negotiations need to be processed according to the relevant rules, and which need to be transparent, open.
Little louder.
Okay. In multilateral negotiations need to be conducted according to the relevant multilateral rules, and which need to be transparent, open, and agreement through consultation.
在气候变化问题上呢，实际上现在既有发达国家跟发展中国家之间的这个意见的分歧，实际上发达国家 内部发展的国家内部呢，也还有一些不同的一些意见，这都是很正常的。
And the differences of opinions happen all the time, and differences exist between development and the developing countries, and it also exists among developing countries and the developed countries.
只要我们坚持多边机制的这些原则，坚持气候变化公约的基本原则，这个大家来共同的协商，共同的来面对这种挑战，我相信呢会找到这个解决问题的办法。基础4国，我们会在其中发挥积极建设性的作用，在这一点上。 我们会积极的推动整个这个进程。
And I think solutions will be found through every country, every individual country following the rules of multilateral negotiation and cooperation. And I believe during this course, basic countries will play a due role and will play a very constructive roles.
Yeah.
Sir,
Anything else?
Yeah.
Nitin Sethi from the Business Standard. Thank you, ministers. 2 questions. One, what are the view of the ministers on the ex-ante process where some countries have asked for an ERF-based process of review of the contributions that countries put up? Two, what do the 4 ministers expect out of the UNSG's summit, and do they expect countries to put numbers and details at that meeting? Thank you so much.
Anybody to respond? Yeah, please. Second question again.
Sorry,
You be louder.
I was asking at the UN Secretary General's summit soon to be held, what do the 4 countries expect would be the numbers or details that countries would present there, and what do you expect
That's
of
a
your
question.
countries to
Yeah.
do?
Our countries have done a lot on a voluntary basis, and we're very proud of what we achieved in this period, these recent years, with respect to reduction of emissions and also with respect to promoting growth, but with an inclusion perspective. As you know, we share values with respect to tackling poverty as part of our sustainable development strategy. So tackling climate change has to take into account also our growth needs. The requirement, the demand for measurement, ex-ante measurement, we think that we can discuss it, but we've all discussed, as in our discussion, our Prime Minister, our Minister of India mentioned, the developed countries, they need to walk their talk. Otherwise, there's no point in asking some to show their results while others didn't fulfill their commitments yet. So we have lots of things to demonstrate. We discussed this during this meeting. We're very proud of our achievements. We will systematize them. It's important to show the world what our countries have achieved, but we don't feel obliged to, because that's not what's happening with the global negotiations. And developed countries, they have a lot they have to promote evidence of what they are doing before asking us to ex-ante providing data about our achievements.
Just regarding the expectation at the UN General, the summit of this SG, when we left Warsaw last year, there was an agreement that we will need to work on the INDCs. And the process is such that it requires us to submit our INDCs during the first quarter of 2015. And therefore, we see this UN summit as a summit where there is a need to build a political momentum to ensure that there is growing political will. And that doesn't necessarily say that there is going to be a submission of any INDCs there, but we do expect indeed that the developed countries should once again provide a lead. We have been talking a lot about the finances, technology, capacity building, in ensuring that that political will is heightened. There is a need, therefore, we believe, for these developed countries to show the political will by demonstrating and indicating probably what their role was going to be, so that particularly the developing countries and the developing world should continuously gain trust, and therefore that pulling us all together, ensuring that we then have a growing political will and also just moving together forward. So from our side, we have deadlines and we have timelines to submit our INGCs. It's very clear. It's not at the summit.
Minister, if you could also comment on the first question on the ex-ante process and the ERF-based review of INDCs that some countries have suggested.
It's a question for experts. You will get. The issue is, no, because we should not go so much technical. We are very firm on our views, our position as commonly determined, and on each consultative process which is on. Even the small differences also will be sorted out, and we'll put up a united view there on world bodies. A. B. What we found out that on mitigation front, even on mitigation front, our actions, South Africa's, Brazil's, and China's actions are more concrete than the developed world, many of the developed countries. And therefore, actually, I will suggest that we'll make a compendium of what we have done actually, and we'll put up also that before the world community.
Hi, this is Natalie Pearson from Bloomberg News.
Yes.
Two questions, please. The UN Secretary General Summit in September, have the leaders of each of your countries already committed to attending this? And if so, what pledges will you be taking there? Specifically also, will Prime Minister Modi be attending that? And the second question is for India specifically. To what extent has India's position on climate talks shifted or changed under the new government?
Under the new government, what we have done is, we have laid more emphasis. For the first time in budget, we have created Climate Action Fund. We have created Adaptation Fund. We have taken Himalayan initiative. We are in process of deciding the Coastal Initiative, Island Initiative, Desert Initiative, Forest Initiative. And we want, all 27 states have already their state action plans ready. We want major cities also to come up with their own action plans. So we want to make it a public movement. And therefore, climate change is not only limited to discussions, but we want to put that practice on ground. And as you know, the Prime Minister, when he was Gujarat Chief Minister, has always not only penned book on climate change, or has added nomenclature climate change to the Ministry of Environment and Forest, but is committed on this issue. Therefore, he is into finding out innovative solutions. And as you know very well, the canals in Gujarat, which were on top of it, the solar panels were placed, that gave three advantages. One, evaporation of flowing water was stopped. Energy was produced without new space. And third, as the cool water was flowing below, 16% more efficiency achieved in power generation. So we are committed. That's the new focus.
Secretary General Summit?
Secretary, as far as leaders from various countries, how they are going or who is going to attend the Secretary General, we'll let you know in due course of time.
Hello, sir. My question is to India and China. In fact, there is a suspicion that that United States is trying to gain something through bilateral negotiations, what they have not so far achieved during the multilateral forum. So do you think the bilateral negotiations between US, India and US, China will dilute the very intent of the multilateral discussions? Or what is your answer on this? Will it dilute the multilateral forum negotiations?
美国和中国和印度，也可能还有跟其他的国家，有一些双边的合作。中美之间呢，建立了气候变化联合工作组。
United States has really funded cooperation. Yes. Okay. And there are bilateral cooperations between China and the United States, and China and India, and I believe the United States must have such similar cooperations, bilateral cooperations with other countries. And China and the United States has joined task force for address climate change.
在气候变化的这个合作呢，也是作为中美战略与经济对话的一个重要的内容。今年7月份呢，我们已经在这个对话当中，气候变化的这个合作，已经作为了很重要的内容。
And that Sino-U.S. task force for addressing climate change jointly is part of the U.S. cooperation in the framework of Sino-U.S. SNED, which has been held in July of this year.
我们这种合作呢，分2个方面，一个呢是政策对话，第二呢是务实合作。政策对话呢，主要是偏重于多边机制的如何来交换意见，推动这个进程，也包括国内的相应的政策的对话。务实合作呢，主要是在这个减缓啊、适应啊这些方面搞一些实实在在的合作项目。
And there are two tiers of cooperation in the Sino-U.S. task force for addressing climate change. One tier is the policy exchanges or dialogues, which will be covering exchanges of information in multilateral occasions, and for the purpose of promoting the multilateral negotiations to move forward. And secondly, the two sides will be exchanging domestic policy measures to address climate change. And another tier of this task force will be focusing on conducting cooperation projects in both mitigation and adaptation.
务实合作呢，主要是节能、提高能效，发展可再生能源、智能电网、CCUS，以及基础能力建设，就是在这些方面呢加强合作。这主要是要双方各自在国内要采取积极的措施，应对气候变化。
And the cooperation for specific projects for the purpose of promoting domestic actions and implementations of measures to address climate change. And those projects, including projects for the purpose of energy saving, energy efficiency, and renewables energies development, and the development of smart grid, and the CCUS and relevant technologies and related capacity building programs.
中美呢，一个是发达国家，一个是发展中国家，但是我们又都是排放大国，我们通过这种合作呢，都要在国内采取积极的措施，来促进国内的减排，加强国内的适应能力。
China and the United States are both major emitters of the world, and one is a major developing countries and the other is a major developed countries. And by jointly cooperating with each other, we hope that domestically we can enhance our capacity in both mitigation and adaptation.
多边问题有多边的机制，是任何少数国家它不能够决定多边的进程。 所以在这一点呢是非常明确的。而且我们这种合作，中国政府非常明确，必须要坚持共同带有区别的责任，坚持公平的原则，坚持各自能力的原则。
And multilateral issues cannot be solved by a small number of countries. And there are rules, multilateral rules, to be followed for multilateral issues. And China has always upheld the principles, basic principles, including CBDR, equity, and individual capacity.
所以我们支持多边的问题，各国协商一致来解决，反对少数国家说了算。
And China has always upheld the principle of multilateral issues to be resolved and discussed under multilateral frameworks, and which cannot be discussed or resolved by a few number of countries.
多边机制按照共同的公约这个机制和原则之下来讨论解决问题的方案。
And multilateral issues should be discussed and resolved in the framework of UNFCCC and other similar multilateral arrangements.
而且我们之间合作讨论的问题，在基础4国这个之间，我们都是公开透明的。
And what has been discussed between United States and China are shared among basic countries.
Yeah. So that's the confidence level with which we are working. And just one small addition. There are many forums on which the climate change is debated. But the basic mandate flows from UNFCCC. And that's the truth. Next.
Is BASIC going to formulate a joint strategy on INDCs, and are you going to submit them by March, or are you going to seek more time for that?
We'll not seek time, but we'll not work only jointly on one issue, on all related issues. So wait for good outcome of joint action. And not only BASIC, we will take others also with us.
Sir, there's an increasing tendency. There's an increasing tendency to shift the timeline of emissions to past 2 or 3 decades rather than historical 100 years, especially in some of the recent working group reports of IPCC. And this would have enormous implications and pressure for basic countries because these are the ones seeing growing rapidly in the past 2 or 3 decades. So what is the basic strategy to counter the pressure or increasing pressure on them to show mitigation targets and action?
See, the science is eternal, and science says that whatever historically emission has happened is also there and affects us, everybody. So that's a permanent fact. Historical responsibilities nobody can ignore. Last.
我说一下，这个问题啊，你问得非常好。这个发达国家呢，他们现在处在后工业化阶段，已经完成了工业化。基础4国呢，我们是发展中国家，我们处在工业化跟城市化的发展阶段，处在2个完全不同的发展阶段。说按照这种发展的规律来看呢，工业化的过程当中，它随着经济的增长，它的排放量呢会有些增加，但是我们的增加是有约束的。发达国家在过去他们历史里排放过程当中，它是无约束的排放，所以历史责任不一样，发展阶段不一样，我们各自的能力也不一样，这就是我们在气候变化问题上应该坚持的原则。
Well, I think you've asked is a very good question. Developed countries has finalized its industrialization. However, on the other hand, we developing countries are in the process of urbanization and industrialization, which are quite different from the stage of those developed countries. And as one of the features for urbanization and industrialization, as our economy progresses, emission will be increasing. However, the way of our increasing emission is not the way like the developed countries, which were emitting exhaust at their own will, and we are developing our economy while controlling we are taking measures to try our best to reduce the emissions, and that's the difference between our urbanization and industrialization and the developed countries' industrialization. The emission between us are different based on the fact that we are at different stage of development. So these are the rules of multilateral negotiation for addressing climate change.
在这个阶段，像基础4国和发展中国家，它随着这个摆脱贫困、提高人们的生活水平，这个减少排放，这个增加一些排放是客观的规律。但是，发展中国家在这个阶段克服困难、减排量也是最多的。所以有一些国际组织他们做了一个测算，到目前为止，各国所做的承诺和做出的减排量，发展中国家占了全球总减排量的60%以上。这60%是谁贡献的呢？其中基础4国做了巨大的贡献。
And developing countries as basic countries, and we have been working very hard and try to reduce the emissions while we are taking measures to develop ourselves and developing our economy and alleviate poverty. And we've been overcoming great difficulties to try to achieve the emission targets of our developing countries. There are research reports released by international organizations and finding that more than 60% of the emission cut achieved by the whole world are contributed by developing countries, and which I believe basic countries are contributing greatly.
Yeah, Deputy Minister Francisco wants to add.
No country resigns its possibilities of growth. And in our countries particularly, growth is an imperative. But what we are focusing on is the quality of growth. We want a growth with social inclusion, a growth with sustainability, a growth that takes into account our multiple challenges. This is a different historical moment that the countries of developed countries face. But we can't accept patronizing initiatives that establish double standards. Also, until now, if they had met their targets, if they had met their commitments, we could consider their arguments in a different way. But for now, what we have achieved by ourselves on a voluntary basis put us in a position of a credit in this debate. And that position, we think that should be our main argument, because we have evidence to show our results, our achievements, and we're talking here about the global public goods. We're not talking only in terms of national results. We're talking of results that transcend our nations. So we are very proud of what we have achieved so far, and we think that we're going to the negotiations with the commitments of our nations in terms of pursuing growth, but sustainable development in a much more authoritative basis.
I think
Some countries have asked for dynamic differentiation instead of following the annexures which are now existing in the UNFCCC. What are each country's views on this process of dynamic differentiation, and if you agree or disagree with it? Thank you.
See, we have all one view. Many countries have their own views and they put up demand. These are discussed. But ultimately, we have one position where the main CBDR and all principles of UNFCCC mandate plus Kyoto remain relevant even today.